Hello, Mark Galliotti of the In Moscow Shadows podcast, amongst other things. And it is Thursday the 29th of February, and Putin has literally just finished his State of the Union address, basically his address to the Federal Assembly. And this year it is, it's over 2 hours, and I think that makes it the longest he's ever done. So I just thought I'd get to give a very, very quick snap response to that. Very much the theme is the future, Russia's future. That's how he frames it. Interestingly, he then very quickly sort of segues into the usual talk about how the special military operation, in other words, the invasion of Ukraine, is some kind of sort of crucial moment, and it's all the West's fault, and the West better watch out, otherwise, we have nuclear weapons, and we have weapons that can strike you, and so forth. But although that was quite extreme, in many ways it was just a necessary prelude. The real essence of the war, there you go, Freudian slip, of the speech is, as he said, the future. But it's hard to know whether we're really talking about Russia's future or his future. Time and time again, he keeps talking about what should be done out to 2030. And in many ways, this is a very kind of rational kind of way of projecting policy outwards. It's also, though, worth noting that 2030 is when the next presidential term, whoever may happen to win it, I think we all know, but when the next presidential term expires. So in other words, he's speaking as if he has already won the election, and I'll come on to that in a moment. But more broadly, there's a certain Putin centrality about all of this. It's quite striking. I mean, he's 71, he's going to be 72 later this year. And one of the big points he made was about the importance of increasing Russians' life expectancy. And his view is that by 2030, life expectancy ought to be brought to 78 years. The fact that he himself will have his 78th birthday in 2030 is, I'm sure, entirely coincidental. So what really was the essence of this very long and, to a large extent, deeply tediously technocratic speech, complete with PowerPoint slides on the Russian economy and such like? Well, really the essence is this. It's his election platform. Remember, Putin's standing for election next month. Of course he's going to win, but it's also crucial for the Kremlin to basically try and pre-rig this election as much as possible. The bigger a gap there is between the real election result and the election result that the Kremlin claims, the more chance there is for protest, or at the very least, the less of a legitimating ritual for the regime it is. So he does actually have to campaign. But of course he can't really seem to be doing so, because that risks lowering him to the level of the political pygmies who are the ones who've been allowed to actually stand against him. Let them go and debate and so forth. He is above all this. But he does still need a campaign, which is one of the reasons why, for example, he recently visited Kaliningrad. He's actually being out and about a little bit more than he has been in the past. But this speech was particularly and obviously a campaign pitch. Because it's not just about long-term measures out to 2030. It's about immediate promises of goodies to a whole variety of different political constituencies. We had a massive segment on the importance of family, and we want big families and everything else. But he also very much noted the degree to which actually there were families that were living in poverty, although there were fewer than when he came to power, but nonetheless it's still an issue. So essentially he's promising money to families in general, but also in particular the impoverished. He's promising more resources and support for pensioners. He's also actually wooing the so-called budjetniki, which are essentially employees of the state, but low-level ones. So I'm not talking about sort of senior civil servants. We're talking about school teachers and kindergarten workers and all sorts of other people. A very big part of the Russian workforce, given that actually the state at federal and local levels is still involved in a lot more things. The whole fad for outsourcing hasn't sort of gone so far in Russia. And it's very clear that this is a potential constituency which can either be intimidated or induced into voting for Putin, but better if they actually vote for Putin for positive reasons. So there's all kinds of promises and goodies for school teachers and the like. So, bit by bit, he's trying to basically assemble a coalition of supporters who have practical reasons for wanting to actually support him. And we also had an interesting reference to the veterans of the special military operation as being the true elite. The elite is not the old people who, basically stuffed their pockets during, when they could. It's this new generation of true patriots who are willing to put their lives on the line for the motherland, and they should be encouraged to go into politics and business and so forth. Clearly trying to sort of, in effect, build a new elite who feel some kind of affinity to Putin. So all of this is about election campaigning. But again, election campaigning that dare not say its name. At no point, as near as I could tell, unless I missed something, at no point did he actually mention forthcoming elections. At no point did he make it at all possible that he might not still be president in the year 2030. Now, that is in part an obvious recognition of reality. He's going to win the election. There's no question about that. But it was also, I think, part of a wider political strategy to make this the there is no alternative election. The idea that this simply becomes, as in Soviet times, a civic ritual. This is not about the public determining who gets to lead them. This is about the public expressing their subordination, about the public realising that there is no alternative to Putin and actually, therefore, demonstrating that they are willing to accept that reality. So again, this is why he's talking about strategy out to 2030, almost to actually say, we all know there's no real question. So don't try and fight it, because you won't win. Just ask Alexei Navalny, one could almost mention, though of course he wasn't anywhere in the speech, but his funeral is tomorrow. So don't bother trying to fight it, accept it, and move on and believe in the reality that I'm creating to you. Inevitability is a powerful force. If you can make people believe that there is no point questioning, challenging, campaigning against Putin, then, well, in a way, you've already won. Now, perhaps mortality in some form or another, or some other deus ex machina will ensure that doesn't happen. I have my fingers crossed. But this speech was essentially about trying to promise money for everything. I mean, no question about where the money's coming from. I mean, especially when at the moment 40% of the federal budget is being spent on the war and security in more broad terms. All this talk about building new universities and providing benefits for this and that group and such like. It felt very much like fantasy politics more than reality. But there you go. That's often what a campaign speech is all about. So I don't actually think there is a true national strategy unless somehow magically the war ends next Wednesday. But that doesn't matter. Again, this was a campaign speech. And in a campaign speech, you're meant to provide your electorate with comforting lies as to where they should vote for you. And certainly this was 2 hours of, 20 minutes of bile, and the rest was precisely about how there was a glorious Russia, a Russia where everyone will be rich and happy and high-tech industries will proliferate and everything would work out lovely. It's just over the horizon, and all you have to do is believe. Sadly, a hardened cynic like me doesn't. Thanks very much for your time.